Welcome to another edition of Vision Alignment with Brian Wagner. I'm your host, and we have some special guests coming on today, or a special guest, but we also have a lot of other good guests that are going to come on this week and next week that I want to make sure you're aware of, because it's going to help you to really understand your vision and how important your vision is to make sure that your core values are aligned with your vision. That's really what this show is all about. So we talk a little about vision, we talk a little bit about blind spots, and we have just a lot of fun with our guests. So without any further ado, I would like to bring on our guest for today, and that is Mr. Dave Caperton. Hello, Mr. Caperton. See if I get it.
Hey, Brian. How are you?
It works.
It works. Technology.
Oh, yeah. Technology is great when you can get it figured out.
Yeah. Well, let me know when that happens.
Yeah. So this guy, sometimes it's a problem.
Oh, no, you're not alone. I mean, you watch some of these things. I was watching that table read of The Princess Bride, right? Oh. Where they brought together the entire. Now you think, man, they got Rob Reiner, one of the greatest directors in history, right? They have Norman Lear. They have all the cast. They have, they've got tech people who are the most savvy out there. It was fun, but technically it was a train wreck. I mean, people didn't know to unmute themselves. Their mouths were out of sync. And I'm going, this is the A-Team, man. We don't any of us have anything to feel bad about.
Wow. That's funny. And so it was a table read for Princess Bride.
Oh, yeah. Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father.
Well, that's awesome. Tell me a little bit about your story, Dave.
Well, let's see. I was built in a log cabin. No. My story actually began in my career as a speaker, and my passion, what I've been doing for the last 20 years, is to help organizations with connection and with inclusion and with creating the kind of environment that is a joyful experience for everyone involved, customers and all the people who are part of the team. So that really began, though, because I came out of education. I was a teacher. I was a high school English teacher for 11 years, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And then at some point, I had an interest. I'd always had an interest in doing stand-up comedy. So I tried it out, and I loved it. It was fun, and on the basis, on that effort, I was invited to be a weekly guest on one of our local morning radio station, the drive time slot, and I would come in and do a little comedy, right, and then I'd go off and teach my classes. So then I pursued that for about 5 years. So that finally introduced me to someone through that stint that I did on the radio, to a fellow fellow's name was Phil Sorrentino. Some of the folks in Columbus, Ohio, where I'm from, will recognize that name. He had a company called Humor Consultants, and it was using humor to improve culture. And so he would go out and speak. And so he was a weekly guest also on that station. And so he said, Dave, why don't you fill in for me? I've got one that I can't do because my schedule won't permit. And I said, yeah, so it was so much fun. And I enjoyed it so much. So really, you could say that my entire speaking, writing career has been about two things. And it's been how do we learn and why do we laugh? And after all these years, I haven't figured out all the answers to that. But I have discovered that there's a real strong connection between those two things. And that message that began as just something to be entertaining and uplifting began to evolve into fulfilling a need for the clients that I served, because I realized that, most people don't understand. They don't really, we talk about blind spots, Brian, and most people have a blind spot about how influential they are and the role that they play in the culture that they create, right?
Yeah.
My tag is speaking of joy, because I think what we do with joy is more effective. I think we're more effective in serving our customers. I think we're more effective in the way that we have relationships with our families. And so that's a choice. And it's a series of choices that we make in our perceptions, in the way that we connect, in the way that we include, and the way that we show that we care about others. And when we do that consistently, we make these choices consistently, we become very influential and natural leaders in the organizations and the families and the social structures, so that our influence is felt. That's leadership. And so that's what I've been doing for lots of years. And I tell you what, you talk about something, finding your calling. If you find something you love to do, you never work a day in your life. And that has certainly been true. I have loved what I've gotten to do.
Well, that's incredible. I can't tell you how important it is. You talked about the two main things. You said how important it is to know how best to learn. You said it better than I can, but you said how to best to learn and how important it is to laugh.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, that to me is it's great. I love to laugh. I love to help people. I love to help people laugh.
Sure.
But making sure that you understand the laughter kind of comes with a something else is in it. So right. So
Right.
with that laughter, they're making themselves more vulnerable, I think is the right word. I don't know.
I think when you're emotionally engaged, then you're open. I always feel like when their mouths are open, there's a part of, no matter how different two people are, if you make them laugh, they agree with you emotionally in that moment, right? Because genuine laughter, not nervous laughter because you said something outrageous and terrible and they are, just trying to diffuse. But I'm talking about really amused laughter, right? When somebody makes you laugh. I think that's the reason why things like political cartoons and satire is so influential. Because when I'm laughing, if somebody draws a funny cartoon, even if it's not in alignment with my political beliefs, but it's so clever, it's so well done that I laugh. You know what? In that moment, I see their point, right? And that makes it very persuasive, right? And if nothing else, it certainly does engage two people emotionally in agreement. So they're in alignment emotionally. Now, what else can you drop in there? Could you drop in learning, right? Could you drop in instruction? Could you drop in some influence, some inspiration? All of that, while that emotionally open condition exists, there's all kinds of things that can also go in. It becomes a conduit, I guess you might think of it as a delivery system for other things.
Yeah. So, and here Jeff Young says, and Phil Sorrentino is a great guy, so he knows who he is. And
that's right.
We got some other people on here. Speaking of joy, love it. So this is good. A good interaction here. And yeah, he's gonna keep doing it until he gets it right.
I like what Jeff just said. He said, "Me too. I'm gonna keep doing it until I get it right." Because the truth is, it's not a destination. Joy is not a destination. It's a vehicle, right? It's a way of traveling, you might say. So it's when we think about joy, I think that's the reason why I think it's important to make a distinction between joy and just happiness. Now, I'm big on happiness, right? I even know here's my book, Happiness is a Funny Thing. So I'm about happiness, right? But happiness it's an emotional, a very transient kind of emotional experience. We're there and then we're not there, right? But when we talk about joy, right, I think joy is a little more, because then it's, I think it's a little more spiritual in nature. And we can have joy in what we do, even when we're not happy in the moment, right? So I think it's that, those choices that we make in each moment to say, what I'm doing has purpose. what I'm doing is my calling, right? And I want to do it in a way that's so joyful that other people are compelled to do it too, right? I want to be influential. So that's, I think, the value of joy. So yeah, you're going to keep practicing it. That's how it's done. I haven't gotten it there yet either. So
laughter brings us all together. So yeah, our mutual friend Randall. So yeah, when you talk about joy, I remember there's a book written about joy, and there was also a gentleman out of Louisville. His name is Michael Ray. Are you familiar with him? He has an organization called Smile Project Louisville, and
Okay.
that's all he does is to go around and try to spread joy no matter where he goes. And his tagline is one of the things he says is smile so much that other people think that they see you smiling and they smile too. So that's the joy aspect of what he does.
Right. Well, what he's recognizing is, look, it's catching. All of our emotional states affect others. This is we don't exist in a vacuum, right? If you're in an organization and you think, well, I'm not a leader, so I can't really affect the culture, right? It's very easy to kind of just defer to the people and then criticize the folks above you in the hierarchy to go like, well, if they, then I could and we would, but they don't, so, right? But the truth is, we are, all of us, so much more influential and powerful than we think. But it really comes down to the choices we make and who we choose to be and how we choose to communicate and how we reach out. When we do it in a positive way, we affect others. My dad was a salesman, and one of the stories that I sometimes tell about him was he traveled kind of a tri-state territory as a sales manager for a company that he worked for almost 30 years, and he probably covered a couple of million miles driving. So he knew about how to drive in every condition. So when it was about time for me to get my driver's license, I would sit in the passenger seat. He'd give me tutorials all the time. Here's what you do in this situation. So we're in a traffic jam one day. Now, if there's anything that will challenge your joy, right, it's a traffic jam, right? Because I've learned that there are a couple of things that I don't care how joyful you are, I don't care how positive you are, I don't care how kind you are, they will tick you off, right? And a traffic jam is one of them. The other one is when you try to put mustard on your sandwich and that little yellow water comes out instead. Man,
that's gonna keep your joy. It's gonna suck your joy.
It will, right? You could have Mother Teresa and the Dalai Lama sitting together right for lunch. I think it's very important that we always give and show a spirit of kindness. Oh my God, it makes you angry. But the traffic is another thing, right? When I'm in a traffic jam, I'm not happy. Why? Because everybody else is an idiot, right? Am I right? The person in front of me was like, what are you doing? Why are you still in that lane? You see we have to merge. So my dad turns to me in this traffic back. I remember I'm like 15 years old, and I see all these taillights ahead of us. I can't even see where it is. And he said, I'm going to show you how to solve a traffic jam. And I thought, what's the punchline, right? Because if there's ever a situation that we're in that we feel like, now this is helpless. I'm helpless. Nothing I can do to affect this. And he said, you got to do two things. I love that. I love it when we can boil things down to just two things, right?
Wow. Your dad was smart.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many things that fall into that category. That's a whole other discussion that we could just kind of boil it down to two things. And his two things were this. He said, stay off the brake and make room. And with that, he began to back off from the car ahead of him, right? And of course, what do people do when you start to make room in a traffic jam where you've got a bottleneck? They start zipping in.
Sure.
And I thought, wait a minute. Now, that doesn't seem fair, right? They weren't waiting and they got in ahead of you. People behind us, they weren't happy. They started horns and flashing their lights and making rude gestures with their hands, right? And I'm feeling embarrassed, right? Because as a teenager, that's your parent and that's your job, right? To feel embarrassed. And I like, Dad, man, you're letting people in. We're getting farther back. He said, nah, trust me, this will work. And he just kept doing it. And pretty soon we started to get up to speed. And then finally we're up to 40, 50 miles an hour and it all clears up. And he said, there, see? And I went, well, maybe, right? I was skeptical. And it was something like, 25, 30 years later that I picked up the Wall Street Journal one day. I was at an event I was speaking for. I was in the hotel the next morning and I grabbed the newspaper and I'm looking through, I'm eating my breakfast. And here's this headline in the Wall Street Journal. And it said, study shows one driver can affect a traffic backup.
Really?
And you know what they said to do? Essentially, stay off the brake and make room. They said, that sounds counterintuitive, right? Because we're letting other people in.
Yeah.
And it offends our sense of fairness, right? They don't deserve this. But here's the thing that I think is the takeaway from all that. If we want to lead, if we want to solve problems that are bigger than us, that affect a whole lot of people, we're going to have to do two things again. And that is, we're going to have to not be worried about who gets credit. Because my dad, when the traffic began to speed up again, nobody pulled up and went, you, sir, are a problem solver.
Wait,
totally wrong, right? No, they were still
right. There was a finger. I'm right. With that one.
Yeah, they didn't change to that. No, they were still, yeah. And then the other thing is, you can't get hung up on worrying about who unfairly gets the benefit. If we're going to solve problems that affect a lot of people, we can't worry about getting credit, right? We can't worry about who might unfairly benefit from the solution. Because if we insist on that justice, then what we'll end up with is we all get stuck for a long period of time. So I think, that to me was a great insight to look, what else can I influence if I can just shed this whole idea that it has to fall within certain, I've got to get credit, right? It can only benefit the people who most deserve. What else maybe is possible? The truth is, one driver can stall the traffic backup. One person can change the entire culture in which they work, right? One person can be the nexus point if they choose to be, and they choose to do what they do and communicate and connect and bridge divides and create common ground. It's possible. One person is more powerful than they really do think. And I think that's really the underlying message of all of this is, look, it's not just about here's what you do because it's a good idea or because you should. It's because it really works and you're more powerful than you think you are. That's the blind spot that I think that so many of us suffer from, is we don't realize how powerful we are.
Very true. Yeah. So Jeff Young was talking about Michael Ray and how infectious his smile is.
Yeah.
And he also says, yes, it's better to be pissed off than pissed on. Jeff Young is a wise man. And then the Jody Ullman. Yeah, so that's great. We got a lot of great interaction. I love this, and you make so much sense about the traffic jam, and I know that's true, but it's hard to actually put that in place when you're driving.
It's hard to do any of this. Why? Because we have to do it on faith, right? We have to do it because we know, my dad, he was sure that what he was doing was correct. He had the courage of his convictions because he knew that this was the right thing to do. He knew it was right. Didn't matter how many detractors he had. Now, it's not that we don't listen to other people, but if you know you're doing something that's positive, right? You're doing something that is is adding emotional value. You may not see, and this is where I sometimes, when I'm talking to folks who are leaders, and they say, we tried to create a positive environment. We tried to incentivize folks. We tried to, we put a ping pong table in the break room, and we tried to give casual Fridays and all, and all they did was throw it back in our face, right? They were still unhappy. And I think, we can easily begin to lose heart in our positive efforts, but we have to do it because it's who we choose to be, not because it's what we're going to get. I think the switch is, and this is the mindset shift that we need to make, is from transactional to relational. Right now, what are we living in? We're living in the most polarized times in this country that we have seen, certainly in my lifetime. And I'm old enough to remember, watching the protests on TV and the Vietnam War, as a kid. And yet I think we're even more polarized than that. I was working with an organization, State Dental Association, recently. Said, we need to find some ways to bridge the divide, to create common ground. Is that even possible now? Where is the common ground? But it does exist. And I'll tell you exactly where. It exists not in our shared experience. It doesn't exist in necessarily, we're all from different identities, right? We grew up differently, different parts of the country, vote differently, worship differently, look very different from one another, different ages, right, that we're seeing in the workplace. How do we talk to the Gen Z workers when we're, those people who are millennials and boomers? We have these divides. But where we all seem to intersect isn't on what we've done or who we are, it's on what we need. We all have the same human needs. And if we are intentional about meeting those needs, and I'll tell you what the 3 needs are, because it's actually simpler than you think. We all have the need to be recognized. We all have the need to feel included. And we all have a desperate need to know that we're cared about. Those are the 3 things.
Recognized, included, and cared about?
Cared about, right? That's the bridge right there. That's the common ground on which we can all meet. Recognition, inclusion, and compassion, right? Where humor comes in is that becomes the inclusion part.
Yeah.
Right? Because whenever I can laugh with somebody, they're part of the inside of my little joke. It's the reason why humor, I think, laughter has to be positive. It has to be inclusive. It can't be victim-based, right? It has to be compassionate. Yeah. But if we can laugh at ourselves, with others, at ourselves, and invite them to join us in that, right? If we can laugh together, those moments of shared laughter become a basis of connection. And that's the foundation for relationships. And people who have relationships, we may not trust the institutions anymore, right? We have whole groups of people who can't feel trust in our police. You have people who don't feel any trust for their politicians. We have people who have been, because of being betrayed, abused, neglected, they don't even have trust in their church, right? But we got to kind of shift away from the institutional to the individual and realize that's where everything is possible still. That's still the most fertile ground when we can forge relationships. I may not trust the police in my neighborhood as an institution, right? But I might trust, Officer Mary, who comes to everybody's door and introduces herself and goes to the neighborhood events and to the playgrounds and stuff and makes her presence known. And I have a relationship with her. So even though maybe the group that she represents in total, I don't have a lot of trust in, I trust her, right? I may not trust the big mega corporation I work for, but I've developed a sense of trust because I know how the manager has made me feel, and my coworkers have made me feel recognized, included, and cared about, right? I know that we've laughed together. I know that we share. And then that becomes how we do it, right? That's how we succeed together. Forget about the institutional, deal with the individual relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it sounds like Jeff agrees with you. So, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I had no idea you were going to drop such value today here, Dave. How do you do it?
Oh, I do, man.
You are all that in a bag of chips. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I love this conversation. The value you've helped us with, and the realization that the three I always thought the three basic needs of a person were, food, shelter, and water. But beyond that,
we still need that. Right.
Yeah, you still need that.
And toilet paper. Yes.
And toilet paper. Right. You got to have toilet paper. So it's all about recognition, inclusion, and being cared about, or compassion.
Right.
Huh.
Exactly.
Wow.
Because that's, it's powerful stuff. When someone feels cared about, it's a kind of immortality that you can accomplish in a single act of compassionate caring for another person. Especially now. I mean, look, we wonder about, what is it we all have in common? Well, what we all have in common is we're all struggling with right now, right? This COVID thing has not spared anybody the experience, even though not all of us have lost someone, right? But we know there's suffering out there, and we know that there's isolation, and we know that, even those of us who are very blessed, and I'm one of them, I've got a family here, I'm not totally alone, and we've been healthy so far. So got a lot to be thankful for. Yeah. And yet have some rough days. We have some tough times. We're all scared about the people we love who are the most vulnerable. We all have those things. In that moment of need, though, there is such an opportunity for us to increase and amplify our own personal influence, not in a cynical way to try to manipulate or, get to leverage something for our own benefit. But if we really want to be compassionate, if we really want to share joy with one another, there's a need right now. So anything we do now is worth even more. And I told you a story about my dad. I'll tell you a quick one about my mom if we have time.
Sure.
My parents were children of the Great Depression, right? And so my mother, when she was just a little girl, she lived in a rented house. She was the youngest of her mom's her children from her first marriage. And so she was married twice, eventually had 10 kids in total. So big family. But the Depression hit them very hard. Lived in Springfield, Ohio. And she came down with, this is before penicillin, right? So she came down with rheumatic fever. And rheumatic fever was just a scourge because kids would get tonsillitis or something that would develop into rheumatic fever, which would damage the heart and sometimes leave them, their joints permanently crippled from the ravages of that, very painful illness. And so she couldn't even climb the stairs to get to her bedroom. So they had to set up a hospital bed in the downstairs, right? And when it got to be warm, now back behind them was a woman named Mrs. Gaffney. And I don't know about you, but probably most people have had a neighbor that they were afraid of. We had that, right? Kind of monster house neighbor. Terrified. The ball goes into their yard and it's like, get another ball, right?
Find another ball.
It's gone, right? So Mrs. Gaffney was that, right? Because she had this garden and she raised a huge patch of strawberries. And she tended it, she watched over it. Because, during the Depression, kids couldn't go, hey, give me a couple of bucks and I'll run down and grab some candy, right? Couldn't do that. So those strawberries started looking pretty good as soon as they started to ripen up, and kids would kind of sneak over the fence to poach them. So she kept watch out her back door. And she kept a broom by her back door and had her, she looked like the Wicked Witch coming out. She was screaming out of the house, like, and the kids would go scattered, right? So they were terrified of Mrs. Gaffney. Well, the doctor told my grandmother, he said, every warm day, try to get her out, my mom, try to get her out into that little lounge chair in the backyard to get some sunshine on her joints. That will help. So she took her out, and it was one warm day in the summer, and she was laying out there, and the gate opened between Mrs. Gaffney's yard and hers. Except for this time, Mrs. Gaffney wasn't wild-haired or carrying anything. she had something in her hand, but it wasn't a broom, right? It was a bowl. And she had her hair neatly pinned back, and she walked up to my mom and she handed her this bowl. And in this bowl was her fresh cut, washed strawberries. And it was topped with sugar and fresh cream.
Wow.
My mom told me, she said, that was the best thing I ever ate. I mean, Brian, we never had strawberries my entire life that I didn't hear the story of Mrs. Gaffney, right? You're having shortcake, Mom. She's like, when I was a little girl, we like, Mrs. Gaffney. Yes, we know. Right? And she'd tell the whole story like we'd never heard it before, right? But here was the thing that finally kind of struck me about that. That bowl of strawberries lasted for 79 years. Until my mom died in 2012. She told that every time there were any strawberries out to being served.
Wow.
79 years, one bowl of strawberries.
Isn't that awesome?
It outlived Mrs. Gaffney, right? It outlived the little girl, right? If I tell the story to someone and they tell it to someone else and someone else, it may outlive me. That's the power of one moment of caring when there's a need. And listen, there's a need. Everybody out there is hurting right now. Everybody out there is nervous, and all of us are vulnerable. If there's ever a time we need to feel recognition, we need to feel included, we need some laughter, and we need to feel cared about, it's now. There's an old adage in politics that says, never let a good crisis go to waste. Don't let this go to waste. There's time, there's an opportunity here to be more influential than you ever thought possible with an attitude of joy.
What a great way to start off a week. This has been phenomenal. I'm so appreciative of having you on. I didn't ask any of the questions I had. I asked the first one. I asked one, and then that was it. And you're right.
You just round this guy up, and off he went.
Wow. Yeah. So this has been phenomenal. Thank you so much for coming on today, Jay.
Oh, I've had a blast.
Can we do this again?
I'd love to do it again. I'm embarrassingly available.
Huh. Okay. Well, I've got a few other guests lined up this week, but Thursday and Friday are probably off. But we'll work on getting you back on. So
yeah, I'd love it.
Oh, that'd be great. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it, man.
I appreciate it. Thank you, and we'll talk soon. All right. Have a good day, and as always, keep one eye on the road.